They destroy a neighborhood they call a slum because the people who live there earn less income.
So lots of cars can drive from place to place. A strong black neighborhood will be erased. Rondo homes will be bulldozed. That's the plan the state chose.
Highway 94 winds through Minnesota, 259 miles or more. Between Wisconsin and North Dakota, of the 1,600 highways created by this nation, 1,394 destroyed black populations.
The highway cut through the main street, forcing stores to be closed permanently. These miles of roads built for fast transportation pushed black neighborhoods into mass migration.
To build Highway 94, the city knocked down his home. Mr. Rondo rents a house now where he feels all alone. Mr. Rondo's heart is broken, the glimmer left his eyes. His son can't get him out of bed, no matter what he tries. His son remembers.
Stay focused over time with action. The universe will support me through the power of attraction. Like a magnet that pushes and pulls, the universe will guide me to resources and tools. Knowledge is my power, my brains work over time.
No one can take what is rightfully mine.
If you take a plant and you realize that it's become root bound, which sometimes happens to communities, but happens to organisms, plants specifically, where the pot can no longer hold the plant can no longer stay in that space if it's intended to flourish, to grow hardier. And root shock is when you take that plant and you place it into another pot, and when displacing it from the pot it was in, we don't take the care to ensure that when it's transplanted, that you break up the soil, that you fertilize the soil, that you water it properly, that you find the proper light for it to get the light it needs and the nutrients. Well, if you think of a community experiences that same sort of root shock. When 94 came through St. Paul, when I-35 went through Austin, Texas, which is where I moved here from, and cut through East Austin, like I-35 went through South Minneapolis, the members of those communities that have been impacted were transplanted. They were displaced. And so root shock is an experience that Rondo has experienced, and it's still experiencing the reverberations of that travesty of 94, and the planners not saying, okay, if we're going to move over 400 families, how do we make their lives better? Or how do we ensure that wherever they go, they'll have the same generational wealth, and they'll have the same opportunities or greater when they go someplace else? So root shock is a condition that happens to communities that have what happened here in Rondo.
Some of them lose their homes and families scattered here and there, and I just feel like they don't know what to do anymore.
Mm-hmm. As you scatter, you thin. So what does that say for the support system? The support system thins because you scatter because you don't know where to go, and some did own some property at the time. So of course those that owned property, they were able to be bought out, but those that were renting, they got nothing. And they just got kind of tabooed, and it's like, what do I do? I don't know what to do, where to go. How do I land? Because the landlord sold the property. So what do I do now?
St. Paul has always been pretty good when it comes down to the police. I mean, I remember a kid that I went to school with or something years back had gotten beat up by the police, but it was you know, you didn't hear about it in St. Paul like that. You know, not like it is, you know, in Minneapolis. There's always been a lot of brutality over there.
My great uncle worked with the police department. He was one of the first policemen in 1912. He was down at the police station. We used to go down to the police station. He'd be out there in the yard on 10th Street, and we'd say, "Hi, Uncle." And the other side of that, my grandmother and my uncles, they were brother and sisters.
When I came here in '89, the community was still very tightly connected. People interacted, and people, they frequented businesses in the area. There were more black businesses along Selby and along University as well. The thing that came to change that dynamic was gentrification, and then the changes in police regulation and the changes in how the cost to remain here because of taxes changed. Some of the community members needing to move or find homes in places that were more affordable.
So Rondo, for me as a community, like gives me that motherland, that connection, that grounding to community in a way that I can't explain it anywhere else. You know, I've traveled in a lot of different places across the United States and the world, and no place feels like Rondo.
It felt safe. It felt like the whole community surrounded everyone and made everyone safe. When you don't have to leave your community, that also means that there's not many strangers coming in. And when there is a stranger coming in, someone knows that that stranger is coming in. And so if someone knows the stranger's coming in, they're going to see or find out who that stranger is and what do you want, why are you coming in. And so that alone helps the children feel safe. So that's what she's alluding to and meaning, that there wasn't that much violence in the community. Not saying that there was no violence, but there wasn't that much violence because the families kept their children, for lack of other terminology, at bay and in obedience, and saying these are the things you don't do and this is what we expect of you. And also a terminology I always heard is, when you leave this house, you're representing me. And so that was huge in the black community.
I think the black and brown bodies historically have responded to the marginalization and the disenfranchisement and the nature of how systemic racism impacts indigenous communities and indigenous people. It finds its way into behaviors that respond to wanting to tap down and to snuff out and to numb the pain of being in a cultural situation or an impoverished situation that doesn't benefit or doesn't give us an uplift or a sense of belonging. That sadly, it's not about gentrification. It's about a larger thing. That gentrification is a symptom of a larger ill that comes from structural and systemic racism that have put people in communities like this one in positions where there's hopelessness and a sense of helplessness, and sometimes that finds its way into behaviors that are deemed either inappropriate or nefarious or just downright nasty. When you ask whether I experienced racism or saw how racism impacted our youth, I see it every day. And if you live your life not being seen, if I have to punch you in your throat to be seen, then I'm going to do that. If I need to take your car, I'm not condoning behaviors. I'm not rationalizing for people. I'm just saying that responses and reactions to behaviors that we see in our community, particularly in Rondo and in communities that are predominantly inhabited by black and brown bodies, some of the behaviors are just a response to wanting to be seen, to be validated, to be heard, to be viewed as a human being.
I had an officer in there one day come to me, it's probably about 5.5 years in my sentence, and said, "I see you all the time in the visiting room. Your mother comes to see you, your family comes to see you. There's something different about you." It's like, what are you doing here?
It was a Saturday night. It was April 13, 1996.
Danny Gibbons was 18 with armed robbery on his mind when he entered with some friends the VFW 3 blocks from his St. Paul home.
As soon as we came in, I opened fire, to get people to, do what we want them to do.
He had not counted on the off-duty Ramsey County deputy sitting at the bar.
When I turned the corner, we immediately exchanged fire.
We have a brick dedicated to my father, Arthur Blakey. They're a lifelong member of the Rondo community, grew up on St. Anthony, which was where the freeway is now located. They lost their house during the Rondo reconstruction and eventually moved over to Central Avenue. And then when he became an adult and was able to purchase land and do those things, he bought my family home where I was born and raised right here on Concordia and Victoria. He was actually shot at the VFW dealing with a strong arm robbery that occurred there, protecting the community. And I think it holds a special place for our family because it's also a place where he also discovered forgiveness. And so he had an opportunity to forgive Pastor Gibbons for the incident that occurred, and I think it gave the opportunity to heal the community in a way. When we talk about law enforcement and its interactions in the community, I know as a law enforcement officer myself, we are not necessarily, we're too black to be blue and too blue to be black, and so it was an opportunity to let the community know that we're here and we're a part of that organization, and we are really here to protect and serve our community, and I think that was a real thing.
Art Blakey got on the stand and testified on my behalf and said, Your Honor, I don't think we should throw away the key on this young man. I think if given a second chance, he would do something different with his life. He just made a mistake. Here you are, you're alive. The person who you've harmed does not, wish harm on you per se, right? You possibly may have an opportunity to do something different with your life if this goes well. I encountered the Spirit of God while I was in my cell. And I was praying. I was at a low point. Was fighting my appeal, was, believing God for a breakthrough, and was watching this ministry, and the guy said, you right there in that cell, God wants to touch you, God wants to speak to you. Now, I know that sounds crazy and cliche, but I was just like, man, I'm in prison. What I got to lose? Ain't nobody looking. Let me go ahead and put my hands up. You feel me? Like, let me go ahead and see what happens. Something might happen. And I put my hands up, and something happened. Something came into my cell and met me. Something took my hands and lifted my hands higher. And there was a energy in this room that I cannot describe to you, but I know to be the holy. And my life has been totally different since then. It's been a progression. It's been a journey. I'm not going to tell you that it was a magic wand wave, but I can tell you that my life has been totally different since that moment, and that was in 2002.
We opened over in another location, and we were in that location for 20 years. And then we felt that we needed a bigger spot because we needed more of the community to be able to fit in. So then we moved over to this spot. And I missed the old spot because that was where we first started. And when we came in on Selby, there was no one moving around on Selby. A lot of places were all boarded up. And actually, my brother, Emmett Booker, had bought the building. And it was all boarded up when we went in. And he said, why don't you guys come and put your coffee shop here? And I said, I'm sorry. And so we ended up saying, okay. So we moved into his building. We were there for 20 years. And then we came over here across the street. And it was just a community, kind of just bringing the community back together. We didn't have a grand opening when we first opened, and so we made it through a year, and so we wanted to kind of celebrate that we made it on that block for a year. And so we were putting together a little, just want to have some music and fun, and so we had just the block, one little block, when we started, and we had a couple food vendors, and we had the stage, and Kwame McDonald was there. He was dancing in the street. When we opened with family members. My mom had just retired, and she was one of my staff. My sister was a staff, nieces and nephew. She was a staff at 8.
Hope that it comes become the community that it was. I don't know if that ever happened. That's what I hope.
I hope it could someday become the community it was. I hope they don't forget the people that live there, but welcome open-armedly Black people that come there, because I fear that once the new Rondo continues and the new things that come, I fear that when Black people go to try and utilize it, that they're not going to be welcome.
I do see myself in the youth of Rondo. I see myself in the youth of Rondo and how resilient, the youth are so, and I hate to say it, but like are extremely talented nowadays, like in ways that are just like mind-blowing. I love seeing that creative passion, that sense of connection and purpose that exists. Like I don't believe that the narrative that's out here, there's a lot of like all of the what's wrong in the community is being unfortunately blamed on the youth, and there's no data to support that. For example, they say, all these young kids with these guns. The average age of a shooter is between the ages of 26 and 31. The average age of a gun victim is between the ages of 26 and 31. Why are we indicting the youth over and over again? These kids, how are these kids getting guns? It's like, these aren't kids. So what I want to say to the youth is like, legit, enjoy your childhood, enjoy your youthfulness, like to the fullest. Don't be in a rush to be what you think is grown or an adult, but like really lean into it and enjoy it. Because paying bills is difficult. Be brave. Be brave enough to be different. And that takes real courage. Be brave enough to be different consistently, every day. It's not a one time. I wake up each day and I make a decision to be who I am. There's some days I'm better at it than others, but I make that decision every day.
Know your past, recognize it, love it, embrace it.
I hope things are better for them, each generation. I've seen 5 already. 5 generations. I hope it's better for each generation than it was for me.
I would hope that, yes, still continue to use technology because there's so much information out there that you can learn daily, but don't forget about the standstill. So the libraries and the elders that are in the community that have that information firsthand, straight out the mouth. You can get that on the internet, but when you hear it live and in person, it's like you're living right with them as they're telling you that story. So, I just hope that persons my age and even younger are utilizing what they have within reach and not just, technology-wise, internet-wise.
If I could speak to the Rondo community about some of my hopes and desires, my hope is that when the sun wakes the morning, that you see in the mirror a divine and perfect being that has the capacity to transform the world in small gestures and small actions, but in large ways, because every small action reverberates. It touches another entity, another space, and it ripples with a power that can really give opportunity to others to realize that their light requires a space to shine too. So I hope that people find that. I hope that people in the Rondo community realize that galvanizing our collective voices and having a sense of really wanting to change for the better the lives of not just you in your home, but for those on your block, in the radius that you drive in your car, the children in your schools, the seniors in our centers, and those who are challenged and disenfranchised and hurting, that we can find a way to help heal. Art opens and closes the wound at the same time, and there is a healing that comes when we use our art, our imaginations, our sense of loving more than just ourselves. I was talking with the crew here, and I was saying that humanity comes from the word of being humble. And to be humble is not to think less of yourself, but to think of yourself less. A sense of selflessness will be a valuable asset for all of us in this community. And then the other thing I think lastly that really, really rings out for me, let's just take time to be silent and just listen. Listen to children, listen to seniors, listen to the air, listen in your home, listen to your heart. Because listening really is the birthplace of ideas, of imagination, of invention. And sometimes we don't stop long enough just to listen.